Well, it has happened. Rate cuts have begun. Jerome Powell just announced that they are starting with a 50 basis point rate cut. We're going down 0.5% on interest rates. Of course, this is a day that many people have been waiting for, have been expecting. A lot of debate. How much are we going to be lowering rates? 0.25%, 0.5%, more than 0.5%, 37.5%. A lot of people have had speculations, and the Fed came out very, very strong, saying that they wanted to lower rates by 0.5%. That's a very strong move. They could have gone with 0.25%, but they went with 0.5%. To me, that signals that they know that something's wrong. They know that the economy is slowing down. They believe that inflation has stabilized, which is really the annual rate of inflation. They believe that has stabilized, and so they believe they are justified lowering by 0.5%. It's a very aggressive move. Even if they were to go down slowly, we're still looking at quantitative easing being, maybe March to April next year, of actually being not constrictive on markets, right? Because of course, when they lower rates, it still means it takes time to flow through the system. So I think they're being very aggressive, seeing that the economy is slowing down, jobs are having some trouble, and inflation's down. So they have the excuse to do it. So they're taking the excuse to do it and lowering rates. So of course, what does this mean for Bitcoin? This means that probably easy money time is coming again soon, right? This means that the last few years we've had quantitative tightening, money has been very tight, interest rates have been very high, and the Federal Reserve is signaling that, hey, we need to lower rates. We need easy money again. We need to stimulate the economy a bit more. Now, actually, even though we've had quantitative tightening for years, we actually have it on global liquidity, right? Especially since the Silicon Valley Bank blew up about a year and a half ago. Especially since then, we have had a lot of liquidity injected in via alternate means. And so actually global liquidity has been pretty much flat for the last 2-3 years or so, although it's starting to tick up again. And so what does this mean for Bitcoin? Bitcoin is a sponge. Don't think of it like a coin, think of it like a sponge. It is a sponge absorbing a mess that is getting exponentially larger, right? The water, the dirty water, the mess is growing exponentially at an annual rate, and Bitcoin is a sponge absorbing it. Right now, at the time of recording, Bitcoin is $60,000. I remember personally back in late 2022 when Bitcoin was $15,000 to $18,000, people were saying it's over, it's dead, we're going below 10K, we're going to $5,000 of Bitcoin, whatever. We are going way down, right? A lot of people, I remember this, okay? Maybe even some of you watching, I remember this. A lot of people were selling at 15,000, 18,000, 20,000, 23,000, right? People were selling at or near the bottom because they thought they'd be able to buy in a bit lower, right? We've never seen a recession before. We never seen Bitcoin in a recession before. We've never seen Bitcoin in a high interest rate environment, blah, 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 blah. Well, I have news for you. Bitcoin did not fall another 50% in a high interest rate environment. Bitcoin went up by a factor of 3.5x, almost 4x if you include the high back in March of 2024, right? So Bitcoin did not fall in a high interest rate environment. It did exactly what people were not expecting, which is go up dramatically. And now here we are at a time where we're about to probably inject a lot more money again, a lot more liquidity again. If there's going to be some kind of flash crash, market crash in Bitcoin, the stock market, real estate, whatever, if that's going to happen, I personally believe the next 6 to 12 months or so is the most likely time that's going to happen. Why? Because historically speaking, right after the Federal Reserve cuts rates is when we see some kind of crash or recession. Now, could this time be different? Absolutely, it could be different, right? I think a very compelling case it could be different this time is if we see in real terms some kind of crash, but in nominal terms, we see prices continue to go up. A lot of people say, oh, housing is so expensive now. Oh, energy is so expensive now. Gas is so expensive now. Food and groceries are so expensive now. It's so expensive. Everything's awful, right? But I'm the optimist, and I look at everything and say, why are you pessimist? Housing will never be as cheap again as it is right now. Food will never be as cheap again as it right now. Your electricity bill will never be as cheap again as it is right now. So buy as much Bitcoin as you can, because likewise, Bitcoin most likely is not going to be ever as cheap as it is right now, right? Bitcoin right now is under $60,000. It is $59,000. Probably with the Federal Reserve coming out and along with the Treasury going to be printing a bunch more money, going to be lowering rates a bunch, going to be wanting to expand the pie of political currency in order to force asset prices up to prevent insolvency for the nation, for major banks. Probably we're going to see Bitcoin go up as well. Historically speaking, Bitcoin is the asset that tracks the best with liquidity. And so how high could Bitcoin go? Well, really, it all depends on how many dollars we print. For a little bit of context, ask yourself, how much money did America spend on World War I? Okay, World War I, 1914, 1917, right? You all know the historical event. Put it down in the comments below how much money you think, you guess, America spent on World War I. Take a guess. Take a random stab at it, right? The answer is $27 billion. America spent $27 billion on World War I. Today, at the time of recording, in the year 2024, we are spending over $6 trillion a year. And notice how we are not in a global war, right? Granted, we have different kinds of proxy wars around the world, especially in Eastern Europe and the Middle East right now, but nothing on the magnitude, size, or scale of World War I, right? And yet, we are spending that much money every 34 hours. Every 34 hours, we are spending $27 billion. Let that sink in. That is how much currency we have printed in the last 110 years or so, right? We are spending a world wars, 4 years of world war. We are spending that much political currency every day and a half. Actually, more than that every day and a half, right? 34 hours is not even a day and a half, right? That is how controlled spending is, and it's only going to increase from here, right? Bitcoin probably in real purchasing power is going to go up over time as a function of adoption, but definitely in nominal terms, it is going to go up in terms of dollars over time because we will perpetually create more dollars in the future. So, what does this mean? I'm getting a lot of questions. Multiple people in the last 3 or 4 days or so have asked me, Luke, is now a good time to buy Bitcoin? Obviously, yes, I'm going to say yes. Obviously, I always say it is a good time to buy Bitcoin, but I'm getting a lot of questions. Luke, is now the time to dollar cost average into Bitcoin, or is now the time to lump sum into Bitcoin? Obviously, you have to make your own decision, but historically speaking, this is a less ideal time to DCA, and this is a more ideal time to lump sum. It is a better dollar cost averaging time near the top of a market cycle or in the bear market of a market cycle. However, I think it is very unlikely we are anywhere close to a new bear market cycle for Bitcoin because we are about to enter probably a multi-year period of extremely easy money, extremely easy dollar liquidity around the world, and more investors are going to be buying Bitcoin, right? A lot of people wonder, could Bitcoin go to $100,000? Could it go to $200,000, $300,000 or more per Bitcoin? I firmly believe yes. Something else that happened in the last few hours here was not just what the Federal Reserve did by lowering interest rates by 0.5%, but you have to look at what Michael Saylor has just done with MicroStrategy. His company, MicroStrategy, of course, as you all know, has a lot of debt to buy Bitcoin. However, something very interesting just happened. They announced that they are going to be rolling over a bunch of their debt from higher interest rate debt, like 5 or 6% interest rates, down to 1/10 of those interest rates, right? Down to 0.6% interest. And what this means is that theoretically, MicroStrategy could double, yes, double the amount of debt to buy more Bitcoin. They so far have raised about $4 billion in order to buy Bitcoin. Obviously, Bitcoin is up significantly since those initial buys, so maybe they could only be able to buy half as much, a third as much, maybe even less than a third as much. However, after today's announcement, it is becoming abundantly clear that MicroStrategy still has billions of dollars left in the bank to be able, the proverbial bank, let's say, to be able to offer convertible notes to institutional investors in order to buy billions of dollars more Bitcoin. And the reason I say all this is because it's important to keep in mind that Michael Saylor is not the richest person in the world. Yes, he's very rich. Yes, he's way richer than you and I. However, there are 800 billionaires on the planet that are richer than Michael Saylor. Here's a question for you. If Michael Saylor alone can leverage his company alone to purchase up to $8 billion of Bitcoin via debt, what do you think is going to happen when 2 more of the 800 billionaires richer than Michael Saylor also decide to copy that playbook, to copy that strategy, okay? At the time of recording now, there are over 100 publicly traded companies around the world that hold Bitcoin to some degree on their balance sheet. Obviously, the vast majority of them hold a very small allocation of the balance sheet, but still, that doesn't change the fact. There are thousands of companies around the world. Only 100, or barely over 100, hold Bitcoin on their treasury reserves, and most of those companies could still easily 10x their allocation to Bitcoin. So that's important to keep in mind, that if Bitcoin could go from 6 cents to $60,000 with barely 1 to 2 million users around the world, what do you think is going to happen in the next 1, 2, or 5 years when all of a sudden 10 million people want to own Bitcoin because 10 million people are sick and tired of having their house prices, energy prices, gas prices, and food prices go up every single year, right? What do you think is going to happen when people for the first time in 2021 had their first touch point with hearing of Bitcoin as an inflation hedge, and now the inflation is about to rise again, most probably in the next couple of years? We see more and more people have their second touch point with Bitcoin. What do you think is going to happen, right? When we have a 10x in the number of people wanting to buy Bitcoin, when the average net worth of the average person wanting to buy Bitcoin also goes up, right? Because we're trending away from the online internet nerds into traditional finance, right? What do you think is going to happen? And again, going back to the billionaires, forget everyone else, right? Forget the plebs, forget the millionaires, forget everyone else, forget the 2,000 billionaires poorer than Michael Saylor, and I say poorer jokingly, right? The billionaires, the 2,000 billionaires with less money than Michael Saylor, forget the 70 million millionaires, forget the Saudis, right? Just focus on the 800 billionaires richer than Michael Saylor. What happens when we get 1% adoption with the billionaires richer than Michael Saylor? That is 8 more Michael Saylor level smash buyers, right? Imagine if you didn't have one Michael Saylor going out in all the podcasts talking about Bitcoin, smash buying multiple billions of dollars of Bitcoin. What if instead you had 8 people with more money than Michael Saylor all doing the same thing simultaneously, coupled with easy money policy from the Federal Reserve and lower interest rates and more money printing, right? My point is, whatever way you look at it, none of us know what's going to happen. Bitcoin very well could be lower in 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months time. However, I strongly believe the odds of Bitcoin being higher are significantly higher than the odds of it being lower, right? There's a perpetual asymmetric bet that Bitcoin is going to be higher than lower because there is a perpetual asymmetric risk to the downside with the dollar, right? Of course, there is some risk that Bitcoin could collapse and go to zero, of course, right? Obviously, I think that's like literally a 1 in a 10,000 or 1 in a 50,000 chance. But with the dollar, there's a 1 in 100 chance, right? There's a 1 in 50 chance. There's a 1 in 300 chance, right? The numbers are irrelevant. You can make up your own numbers. The point is the asymmetric downside risk of dollars is perpetually higher than the asymmetric downside risk of Bitcoin, and therefore is perpetually an asymmetric bet to buy Bitcoin from in terms of dollars, because dollars are the water, dollars are the mess, they're easy to make, and they're just expanding exponentially, and Bitcoin is the digital sponge that is going to absorb those dollars, right? And if we are not careful, we are going to go from $27 billion for World War I to tens of trillions of dollars today in the early 21st century to soon enough we'll be having World War III, where we're no longer talking in terms of trillions, but in terms of quadrillions of dollars. And that's why you should consider getting off zero and buying some Bitcoin. Yes, for you, but especially for your kids, right? The dollar is an exploitation, and people exploit the technological system that is the dollar to steal for themselves at the expense of another. And buying Bitcoin is essentially saying, I no longer want to be exploited, I want to be exploitation free, and in doing that and accelerating the adoption of the system that cannot be exploited, we are lowering the probability that there are going to be wars in the future, right? So, I've said a lot. Long story short, Federal Reserve is lowering rates by 0.5%. Michael Saylor is probably going to be able to buy at least another couple $2 billion worth of Bitcoin based on the announcement that MicroStrategy made in the last day or two. And Bitcoin's probably going to be higher 1 year from now, right? Right now, the price is $59,000. Time will tell how this video ages, but so far, it's worked out pretty well so far. We've gone from 15,000 to 73,000. Now we're back down to 59,000. People think Bitcoin's dead. Pretty soon we'll be at 80,000, 100,000, 120,000. We'll be even higher. Most people will be asking, oh, is it too late to Bitcoin? Am I too late to Bitcoin? Wah. I'm going to cry because I didn't put in the work. I didn't learn about it. And now I'm going to, just be sad. Don't be sad. Be logical. And if you're logical, you understand there was no top for Bitcoin. It is going up forever. At $5, people thought they were too late to Bitcoin. At $500, people thought they were too late to Bitcoin. Now at $50,000, people think they're too late to Bitcoin. At $5 million and at $500 million, people will be saying the same thing. So, get some Bitcoin, get off zero, take self-custody, make sure your Bitcoin is prepared and protected against critical key loss, lawsuit, litigation, against the tax ban, everything else. Make sure your Bitcoin's protected and get ready, because the next 12 months to 18 months are probably going to be really, really interesting, really explosive, and in many ways unprecedented. We've never seen this much institutional adoption for Bitcoin coupled with this much institutional distrust in the American dollar. Let's see how the cookie crumbles. And I think it's going to be an increasingly orange cookie that's going to be crumbling upwards.